Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kate, and I'm here to bring you a very special and exciting program today with us at the National World War II Museum. But before we do that, I want to do a quick housekeeping about Zoom. So in the Zoom webinar room, if you have questions for our curator, Larry, today, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a button that says Q&A. You can type your questions in the Q&A throughout the program, and we will be asking him as we go and then at the end. Also, if you have to leave early or you want to rewatch this program or share it with someone else, we would love that. So we have our program uploaded to YouTube later today to be watched at any time. And so again, thank you for joining us. And today, we are also joined by Larry Decuers, one of our curators at the National World War II Museum, to do something a little bit different than what we usually do on these webinars. And we're going to do some drawing. So Larry, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Kate. Yeah, my name's Larry Decuers, and we've done this one other time before where we drew the F4U Corsair and the B-17. But today we're going to draw two of the premier fighters from the European Air War, the Bf-109 and the P-51 Mustang. So this is me, Larry. Good to see everybody again. So we'll get started. The first one we'll draw is the Bf-109. Now, the Bf-109, the B stands for Bavarian, and the F stands for Flugzeug Works, which basically translates to aircraft works. So it's Bavarian Aircraft Works is the manufacturer of this aircraft. Now, many times people call it a Messerschmitt 109 or ME 109. Now, where that designation comes from is the aircraft's designer, an engineer named Willy Messerschmitt. Now, this aircraft was first produced in 1935, so it's a relatively old aircraft when World War II starts. But in 1940-41, it was a very capable aircraft. Now, the version we're drawing today is a late war version of the aircraft. So the Bf-109G was one of the many variants produced throughout the war, and they just kept upgrading this aircraft. And it saw service all the way through the end of the war. And in the hands of a capable pilot, it was still a very good aircraft and would pose quite a threat to American fighters and bombers. Now, another thing you might notice about these aircraft is they're a little sleeker looking than the radial engine aircraft we drew last time. So the F4U Corsair, if you may remember, had a really blunt nose. And that's because of the engine. The F4U had a radial engine, which meant the cylinders of the aircraft were arranged in a circle, and air passed over the engine to cool it. Now, both of these aircraft we're drawing today have inline engines, which means the cylinders are kind of arranged like a car engine. They're all in line. And the power plant for this aircraft was a V12 liquid-cooled engine. So So what that means is the engine cylinders are just all in a row, 2 rows of 6 on either side. And the part I'm drawing on the aircraft right now is the exhaust. So you have 6 exhaust stacks here. There we go. Now, another strange thing about this aircraft was the engine was upside down, and all of the coolant was on top. So ground fire, one of the bad things about a liquid cooled engine is if you develop a leak in your coolant system, the aircraft will quickly cease to function. That's a little different than a radial engine, which is air cooled, doesn't rely on liquid to cool the engine. So having the coolant systems up top prevented this aircraft from being vulnerable to ground fire. Now, the P-51, which had its coolant system on the bottom of the aircraft, is very susceptible to ground fire.
And we want to remind everyone, just like last time we did this, if you are following along and drawing with Larry, please share your drawings via social media with us because we'd love to see them.
Yeah, so this aircraft was actually produced in great numbers. I think it's the most produced aircraft in history, I think, with over 35,000 examples of all variants made. So this little part right here I'm drawing is the recess for a 13mm machine gun, which is pretty much equivalent to our .50 caliber. So the Bf-109G had 2 of these, one on either side, and the hood there. Now, there's the wing on the airplane. So after you get the basic shape of the plane, you can go back and add panel lines, which make it look a lot more convincing. So that part I'm drawing right there is the aileron. There's a few air intakes under the nose here and on the wing. Now, this airplane also had a 20mm cannon, or sometimes even a 30mm cannon, mounted through the propeller hub. So the Bf-109G could carry about 200 rounds of this 20mm cannon here. And let's see, I think in the 13mm machine guns, there was 600 rounds. So this gave the German pilot probably about 20 seconds of sustained fire. So not a whole lot of time to hold down the trigger, you know. So these pilots would fire quick bursts at their targets. So there's our rudder right there. And then in order to identify the aircraft, there was a national insignia on the side. And the Germans used, everybody's probably familiar with it, but they used a big cross. So it was a white outline with a black cross.
Larry, we actually have our first audience question, and Coughlin is wondering, are there still Bf-109s around today?
There sure are. So that number, 35,000, those weren't all produced by Germany. This aircraft was being produced under license in places like Spain. They produced them for a long time after the war. I think the aircraft was produced all the way until 1956. So it had some life after World War II. And a lot of these aircraft were used during the Israeli War of Independence, immediately following World War II. But the ones that you tend to see flying today are the Spanish manufactured aircraft. Now they look a little different. So they have a different engine. So the engine, the nose kind of has a little bulge on the bottom to accommodate the different engine it has. But they're quite common. And if you've ever seen this movie called The Battle of Britain, which was produced in, I think, 1969, I believe, there's tons of World War II era aircraft in that film. Obviously, 1969, there wasn't computer-generated graphics back then. So these, they had to use real aircraft. So in that movie, you can see lots of Bf-109s, albeit the Spanish version, but also HE-111 German medium bombers, and of course, a lot of Spitfires and a lot of Hurricanes. So there's our basic Bf-109G. Now, I'm going to draw the P-51 right below it. Now, these aircraft really look very similar. The P-51D version has a bubble canopy, and that kind of makes it look very different than the 109. However, the D variant is a later war version of the P-51. So originally, the P-51 had a canopy that looked very much like the 109's canopy. And from a distance, it looked very hard to tell apart. So there you can see that bubble-shaped canopy.
Larry, we had another audience question asking about a personal question. How did you get into drawing airplanes in the first place? What got you interested?
Well, I just, yeah, when I was supposed to be paying attention in school, I used to doodle a lot. So I guess it was just something to pass the time. But I guess I've always been interested in airplanes, and drawing them is kind of a neat way to kind of commit them to memory. Also, another way to learn a lot about a particular airplane is to buy a scale model kit and put it together. It's a great way to learn more about a subject. Now, one of the most distinguishing features of this P-51 is this air intake right here. So this air intake allows or cools the coolant for the radiator and the oil in the plane. So when I get a little more of this plane on paper, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. So here's our wing. So the radiator for the airplane is about right here. But there's all this ductwork where air passes through as the airplane's flying, right here. And this cool air cools, the coolant for the radiator and the oil that circulates through the engine. And then there's a smaller exit port right here that's adjustable. It's kind of acts as a nozzle. So as this cool air is heated up by the hot liquid from the radiator and the hot oil, it exits through this smaller hole. And what happens is it gives the airplane a little bit of thrust. So what this little bit of thrust does, it cancels out the drag caused by the coolant system. Of course, I'm not an aviation engineer, but I think that's pretty much the gist of it. So now we're P-51's looking pretty good now. Now, the exhaust stack on the 51 is set a little higher on the fuselage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 1, 2. Yeah, so six pipes coming out of there. Now we'll add some panel lines to make it look a little more convincing.
So Larry, in your opinion, which fighter, and this is a question from Facebook, is the superior aircraft and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Right after I finish drawing this, I'm going to break all that down. I think the superior one, I think they were both really good aircraft. But they each had to do different things. So the P-51's, I guess, greatest contribution to the war was the fact that it had long legs. So it could fly all the way from England to Berlin, make that round trip to defend our bomber formations. So it excelled at that. But the Bf-109 being an older fighter, by the time these two aircraft met each other in the skies over Germany, the Bf-109 is 5 years older, but it's been, like I said, it's been upgraded throughout the war. And the Bf-109 doesn't need all this range. They're flying right over their own towns and cities. So range isn't a big issue for this German fighter. However, for the American fighter, range makes all the difference in the world for it. So, okay. There we have our Bf-109G and our P-51D model Mustang. Now, to kind of break it all down between the two. All right. So, armament-wise, the Bf-109 has two of these 13 millimeter machine guns in the nose, which is pretty much the equivalent of the 50 caliber machine gun carried by US fighters. So 600 rounds for those two machine guns. And then this 20 millimeter cannon in the propeller hub. They could carry 200 rounds for that. So if the German pilot just fires his 20 millimeter, he gets about 16 seconds of sustained fire. He fires his machine guns, he gets about 20 seconds of sustained fire. So that's about a total of 36 seconds of sustained fire. Now the P-51 is carrying 1,880 rounds. It has three 50 caliber machine guns in each wing. That's a total of 6. So the P-51 can get 20 seconds of sustained fire out of all 6 guns. And then because of the way the ammunition boxes were in the wings, the outboard guns couldn't be fitted with as much ammunition as the inboard guns. So after your two outboard guns run dry, you still have another 9 seconds to sustain fire with 4 guns. So what is that? That is a total of about 29 seconds to sustain fire. The P-51 also carries the smaller ammunition, but it's that's perfectly adequate for fighting a fighter plane. Now, the German fighters, the Bf-109, I mean, their primary concern is to knock these bombers down that are bombing their cities, and the fighters are a nuisance for them. So that's why there's larger armament on these Bf-109G fighters. This larger round was do more damage to a larger aircraft. Also, you could add gun pods to the wings. So you could add an additional 2 20 millimeter cannons to this aircraft to make it a bomber killer. Now the top speed of these two aircraft is it's pretty close. So for a late model Bf-109, you're looking at a top speed of about 428 miles an hour. The P-51D model, 437 miles an hour. 35,000 of these produced, 15,000 P-51s produced. Now here's where the P-51, this is their claim to fame, this huge range here, this 1,300 mile range when you add these external fuel tanks to the wings. Now these are drop tanks. When they would be involved in a dogfight, they'd have to drop these because the aircraft didn't perform well with these drop tanks on it, in a dogfight anyway. So this 1,300 mile range is more than sufficient to get the P-51 from its base in England to Berlin, dogfight over Berlin, and then on their way back, they would peel off from the bomber formations and just strafe up anything they saw, just targets of opportunity. And then they'd continue on back to their base in England. So, I mean, this aircraft has extremely long legs and long range. You look at the range on the 109 here. I mean, it's only at best 450 miles. So that's a huge difference. Let's talk about the top scoring aces in each aircraft. For the Bf-109, the top scoring German ace was a guy named Erich Hartmann. And that's not a mistake there. That's how many aerial victories he achieved, 352. Now you look at the top American scoring ace in the P-51, that's Major George Priddy. He has 24 victories in the P-51. So that's a huge difference in aerial victories. Now, this kind of, the Germans are in the war a lot longer than we are. I mean, that's one factor in it. Also, Erich Hartmann, he flew on the Eastern Front. A lot of the aircraft encountered over the Soviet Union were really obsolete, a lot of biplanes even. Now, another reason why these German aces scored so high, they had this fly till you die policy. So their best pilots, they would just keep flying and flying and flying and flying until they were killed. That wasn't the case for American pilots. So you would fly a tour of duty, and then you would be rotated out of the combat zone, and you would go home and you would become an instructor, and you would train new pilots on various tactics or real world experience, and pass this on to a new generation of pilots who would then go over and continue fighting the war. So it was a rotation policy that kind of prevented our fighter aces from becoming triple-digit aces. But Erich Hartmann, he's the highest scoring ace, but he's not by any means the only one with numbers that high. There's at least 10 German fighter pilots who flew on the Western Front and scored over 100 kills each. So, I mean, the German fighter pilots were either really good or they were just terrible. Now you have this small pool of guys who would run up this tremendous score, but the majority of their fighter pilots by 44, 45 were inexperienced. But I hope that answers your question.
I think it does. And while you were explaining, we got a lot more audience questions, and we've got time for just a few more. So I want to start with a question we got about the Bf-109 from Facebook. And someone asks, what's the final thing that you drew on the Bf-109? It looks like a wire that extends from the middle of the plane to the tail.
Oh, okay. That is the aerial antenna. So that is just an antenna, and it's a piece of wire. And it's for the radio in the aircraft.
And did
the P-50, I'm sorry?
Oh, no. Did the P-51 also have one?
It did, except there's the back of the pilot's seat right there. And the radios were arranged like this, right behind the pilot on the P-51. So the antenna ran from here through a hole in the canopy to the tail, like so.
So we actually got a really interesting question from Doug, and he wants to know, the P-51 was known as a fighter. As I understand it, the P stands for pursuit. His dad, it does stand for pursuit?
Yes, that's correct. Uh-huh.
And so the redesignation now stands F for fighter. Can you explain why they did that, or do you know?
Yes. So this classification system, P for pursuit, B for bomber, the reason why they weren't F for fighter in the World War II, an F variant back in World War II meant photo reconnaissance. So I believe the P-38 Lightning that everybody knows, the twin-boomed, twin-engine fighter, The photo reconnaissance variant of the P-38 was called the F-5, I believe. Yeah, I think that's right. So they would fit. The Lightning was pretty fast aircraft, so they would fit the nose with cameras, and then that variant was F5, F for photographic, because P was already taken up for pursuit, I believe. It was something ridiculous like that.
Awesome. Well, Larry, it looks like we're just about out of time. So I want to thank you for joining us today and remind everyone who's watching, if you drew any of the planes or even planes we didn't draw today, please share the drawings on Facebook, on Twitter with us, or email them to the museum. We love to see your drawings. And Larry, we'll give the last word to you.
Oh, well, I really hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a little something too. I hope to see you guys soon on the next edition of Drawing with the Curator. Thanks a lot.